Let's bring in foreign editor at The Australian, Greg Sheridan. Greg, I genuinely don't know where to start with all of this, so let me just hand over to you. How do you reflect on the last 24 hours?
So look, Kieran, great credit to Trump, of course. We shouldn't be churlish about that. It's wonderful to see the hostages back. Trump oversells everything. That's natural, and you wouldn't expect him not to. I don't want to be the skunk at the party, but I'm very sceptical about everything going forward from here. Israel gave 2,000 Palestinian prisoners back to Hamas, really. And among those were hundreds of murderers. And that sets up a tremendous incentive for Palestinian terrorists in the future. Israel doesn't have the death penalty, so a future hostage operation can get terrorists released. The Hamas is not yet disarmed, but even if it disarms, the anti-Semitic hatreds in the Gaza Strip for Jews and for Israelis continue on. There is no credible leadership in the Palestinian side and no credible partner for peace. I'd be very sceptical about whether Arab nations will actually put troops in to do anything meaningful. If they're going to enforce security, that means they're going to be willing to shoot Palestinians to stop them from attacking Israel. I don't know any Arab government that's willing to do that. And I think calls for Australia to be involved are wildly premature. However, the region has changed for the better. Iran is disempowered. Hezbollah is disempowered. Assad has fallen in Syria. The Gulf states got a bit scared, so they're crowding back close to Trump and close to Israel. So that's good. Let's push forward and see what can be done. But there is no prospect of two states for many, many years to come. A two-state solution has to be the ultimate outcome. But the way the Albanese government talks about it as if it could happen next week is ridiculous. So it's a good day. You want to celebrate the good days you get in the Middle East, but I've watched a lot of good days come and go in the Middle East. You remember the Oslo Accords, Kieran? Yasser Arafat and Yitzhak Rabin shaking hands on the White House lawn? Well, who thought that would lead to decades of conflict?
Yeah, and Rabin assassinated subsequently. And I want to ask you, because you rightly point to those sort of broader geopolitical questions, and I guess there are question marks over all of that. There are question marks too over the thing that Donald Trump alluded to in that little grab that we played there, and that's Benjamin Netanyahu, his own future, given the various questions over him, including the fact that October 7 happened in the first place, Greg.
Well, that's right. So I'm sure I've interviewed Netanyahu more than any other Australian journalist, and he's an incredible person. I mean, he is a very formidable leader, but leaders tend to stay around too long. That happened to previous Israeli leaders. Ben Gurion ended up a sad figure in the Knesset. The Israelis need to sort out their internal situation. I mean, it was their internal weakness and division which partly allowed Hamas to take advantage. It's a peculiar situation. As you point out, 20% of the population is Arab, and the feeling is they can't really come into a government very easily because of the security dimensions. That means a Jewish government of Israel has to get sort of 50 out of 80% of the Jewish vote, which is incredibly difficult. So you get very incoherent governments. Netanyahu has certainly been pushed by the far right of his government. I think Trump gave him cover to move away from them towards this peace deal, which they didn't want to do. There's a massive issue of conflict over judicial reform. Israeli democracy, like all Western democracies, has been a bit dysfunctional the last couple of years, and it came together for this crisis. If you inflict war on Israel, the whole society comes together and fights like a tiger. But they now need to sort out their own internal stuff. I think Trump had a point. A lot of the charges against Netanyahu just look, trivial and ridiculous. But they do need to sort out some of these internal issues if they're going to govern coherently, and certainly if they're going to make way for peace with Palestinians.
And including that whole question of military service for the Orthodox. I know it's a point of tension, having spent time there myself with Israelis and secular Jews who do serve. It doesn't always go down so well. Greg, I want to ask you quickly, Pat Conroy, the industry minister, the defence industry ministers in Washington, announced a co-production agreement with Lockheed Martin, Department of War. He said that guided missiles are going to be produced in Australia within months before the end of this year. Are they finally catching up on this area of great need for our defence?
Well, they're kind of $1 million late and 1,000 years, $1 million short and 1,000 years late. Though I've been following this guided missile production facility for years and years and years. It was announced, you know, a long time before the end of the Morrison government term, and it's always been just around the corner. I'm sure this is a good announcement and something will happen. My beloved friend Joel Fitzgibbon was absolutely blowing smoke at you, Kieran, in that last segment. The government has not followed the Defence Strategic Review recommendations at all. Air defence capabilities, missile defence capabilities. There are about 1,000 things in the DSR which are not being followed. The DSR's author, you know, the former CDF, Angus Houston, says we should be paying 3% of GDP on defence, not 2%. I think this AUKUS review will probably be okay because at this phase, all we're doing is giving money to the Americans, so they'll lie back and take our money. But yeah, the government is moving, and partly to impress Trump, but it's so slow, it's so tiny. You know, this $12 billion to upgrade the West Australian facilities, that doesn't even start for another couple of years, and that's $12 billion over 10 years. The truth is, this government has a spending crisis and it is not prioritising defence. It's saying nice things about Trump and it's making a lot of its smoke and mirror announcements now to try to convince the Americans that it's doing a lot of stuff before Albanese has his meeting with Trump.
Greg, great to see you as always. Thank you.